April had tried to explain in her best and most polite voice that it wasn't an impersonation, that she was trying to inform everyone about the problems in the Arctic, just like Lisa from the Polar Institute had encouraged her. But her words were wasted. From that moment on, she was known as Bear Girl, and judging from the accompanying sniggers, she wasn't sure it was a compliment. The article in the local press hadn't helped either. Somehow, a local reporter had got wind of April and her father's trip to the Arctic, and since it was a slow news week, he'd wanted to tell their story. Dad had been reluctant, but not April. She had seized the opportunity because surely here was a chance to tell everyone about how much the polar bears needed their help. Here was a chance to warn people how quickly the Arctic was melting. But then the article had got lots of facts wrong, including April's own name. As if she were anything like an Alice. And worst of all, rather than saying that she had saved Bear, the article implied that the captain of the ship had done all the hard work. April wasn't looking for brownie points or gold stars or even compliments. All she wanted was for someone to take her seriously, especially now time was ticking for the planet. If I really was Bear Girl, she muttered, then people would be listening. They would be making changes. A crow perched on the fence cawed in agreement. April sighed. It was February, and despite a handful of brave daffodils, the air still carried a brisk chill. No doubt Dad would call her in soon, worried she would catch hypothermia or some other life-threatening condition. Ever since they had got back from the Arctic, he constantly worried about her and fretted non-stop that she would fall into some terrible danger. Even now, she could see him through the kitchen window searching for her, which meant she only had minutes left. She carefully took a photograph out of her pocket. It was the safest place for it, but more importantly, it also meant it was pressed to her heart at all times. It wasn't the kind of photo most people carried in their pockets. It wasn't a photo of a mum or a dad or brothers and sisters or grandmas and grandpas. This was a photo of her and a full-sized male polar bear, huddled together in a tight embrace that would seem incredulous to most people. It was, of course, a photo of her and Bear, and it was her most treasured possession. Taken on the quayside in Longyearbyen, Svalbard, the pair of them were silhouetted against the sun, leaning into one another as the flash of the camera caught their final goodbyes. They were pressed so tightly together that it was hard to see where Bear ended and the girl began. Even now, April couldn't look at the photo without feeling a horrible tightness in her throat. "Hello, Bear," she whispered, hearing the tremble in her voice. April wasn't sure how long polar bear memories lasted, or even if Bear remembered her at all. Not in the same way she remembered him, anyway. She would never, ever forget him. Not for as long as she lived. And then for 1,000,000,000,000 more years on top of that. No doubt he was getting on with his new life, the way that Dad said she ought to be getting on with hers. It wasn't like she hadn't tried. Every day she did her best to live the kind of life that Dad, Granny Apples, and everyone else seemed to expect from her. A perfectly normal human existence. And that might have been enough for some people. But every so often, a memory would surface in April's mind. The tickly sensation of Bear's whiskers on her face. The sudden touch of his wet nose, and most vivid of all, the warm, soft chocolate of his eyes, and the way his gaze had melted into her own. "I miss you," she said quietly, making sure Dad couldn't hear through the open kitchen window. "I miss you so much." She didn't expect a reply.